Can you do the same with your game? I don't think you can.
I think I can.
It was harder to achieve the outcome, therefore I'd have to give it the crown of the best. Would you agree?
No, I would not agree, not necessarily. It is infinitely replayable in the sense that it was a massive game. It had over 1 million levels published to it.
To me, that is a shining achievement that should be heralded as the best game of all time. Now, Max, we all have our favorite games, but there can only be one best game, apparently, according to the internet, if you believe Reddit threads and whatever. And of course, your best game of all time is wrong, because it is not my best game of all time. So,
Interesting.
we are gathered here today to debate which one of our games is actually the best of all time. And I guess I'll start, Max, by explaining that when we discussed doing this idea of picking what is the best game of all time and then going at each other over it, I had to sit around for a while and really think, what are the games that I regard as the best, you know? And so I sat around and I came to a list of about 6, right? And that list includes stuff like, you know, Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, Fallout New Vegas, Witcher 3, Borderlands 2, Grim Fandango, for those of you out there that know ball.
Oh, boy. That's a good one.
That is a good one. And Age of Empires 2. And so I sat around and I looked at that list for a while. I stared at it longingly into the night. And I ended up coming to the conclusion that the best game of all time, if you put a gun to my head and I have to choose, even though I don't want to choose, if I have to choose, I'm going to say it's Witcher 3, all right? That's where I'm landing. What is your quote-unquote best game of all time in your opinion, Max?
See, okay, here was my thinking before I go on about yours, because you've made a good choice, but there's a flaw. I'll get to it.
Oh, okay.
It's a flaw. Okay, so essentially my process started with what was the most nostalgic game for me. Now, I was a kid who was brought up on PlayStation 3. We had an Xbox, but I barely used it. And so the most nostalgic games for me are Little Big Planet 1 and 2, probably 2, and Burnout Paradise. I played those games to death when I was younger. Just, out of this world. I mean, even you played Burnout Paradise, and look.
We did, and it was quite fun.
It was very fun. It was a great game. And Little Big Planet is any kid at that era knows what that game is and has a soft spot for it. Now, is it the best game? No, neither of them are winners in best games, but I had to pick one of my best games, and I just have to give it to Little Big Planet 2. Just hands down, like it is the most fun I've ever had in a game. It taught me how to be creative, and it was just a really unique concept, and I don't think it has been done in the same way since. It laid the groundwork for games like Roblox.
That's a very fair impression, because a lot of those games that were during the 360 PS3 era were so vital in the future games. They kind of laid the groundwork, you know, whereas the games before that, there's obviously a lot of iconic ones before that era, but the ones from that era really laid the groundwork from where we are today. So I feel like I can totally understand why you went the nostalgia route. Of course, you're wrong. Of course.
I have to be wrong.
I very much appreciate why you've selected that game, and I also understand how nostalgia plays into all of our opinions when it comes to what we think are the best games. Like, for example, on my list, Fallout New Vegas, Skyrim, these were games, Grim Fandango, these were games from my childhood that I actively played and kind of built my enjoyment for those various genres. Age of Empires 2, for God's sakes, I played with my neighbor when I was a kid, you know?
That's crazy.
It's one of those things where, of course, that's going to affect our selection. And so before we get into the arena of battling whose game is actually better, I think it is a fair point to acknowledge that we're both obviously very nostalgic for our different games. So it works out nicely. I guess to start with this, we should probably state why we love the game. Beyond just nostalgia, beyond why just enjoyment of the game, what is it about each of our games that is good? And so I guess for me, if I had to simplify it down, why I think Witcher 3 is my favorite game of all time, is probably that the open world works so well in tandem with the story. And it's not just one story, it's multiple stories. Like when I ride Roach down a gravel path in that game, and I encounter a Consuela that needs my help, and I get on this branching story path with different choices, it really does feel like I'm making my own narrative in a world filled with narratives. And I love it so much, and that's just one of many reasons. But I think if I had to summarize why I love the game so much, that's probably the core antithesis, the reason underlying everything. What about you? For Little Big Planet, why do you enjoy that game as the best?
It was a game that full-on encouraged creativity and sort of introduced me to the world that is, you know, using your brain to imagine and come up with things. And honestly, like I don't think kids nowadays get an outlet like what I was lucky enough to have. Like, you know, Minecraft is very good, don't get me wrong, but you don't get to share it with people. You don't get the the joy of, oh my goodness, 500 unique people have played my level and liked it, right? You very rarely get that. It also taught me online safety, actually. It did a lot of that back in the day. Yeah, it did. Nothing bad ever happened to me at all, but it taught me, this is what you can do online and this is what you absolutely should not do online. I think it's just a very important game in my personal growth. The story is not deep. It does not have any grand, meaningful thing. It's not as in-depth as The Witcher. You can complete it in 2 hours if you're an adult, maybe 7 if you're a child like I was. It was just so special and it had such a charm to it. Anyone who loved those games back in the day who it worked for would vouch for me there and saying like the charm is second to none, and I don't think a game has come close. Maybe Astrobot. People really like Astrobot, but Sackboy's just better. Come on now.
and Astrobot won Game of the Year, didn't it? Or it came close or something like that?
It did win Game of the Year 2024, I believe.
It makes a lot of sense that people now that are discovering this kind of formula of games are now heralding it as what it should be, which is a great game, And so a lot of people watching this probably came from our era of 360 PS3 who played Little Big Planet and will obviously agree with you, Max. But I guess where I'm going to attack you because your opinion's wrong, as it is a good game. It is not the best game, I'm afraid. So let me break this down for you, Max. All right. You have categories, and when you're ranking a game, right, you have qualitative categories that you can go to, like music, graphics, story, gameplay, etc. And each of those, in my mind, you can give a 1 to 10 rating. And in my mind, the best game is one that has the highest score, God damn it, because this is fury, all right? You're wrong. Your opinion is bad. And so to go after you here, Little Big Planet is great, but when we're going down the list, right, Witcher 3, graphics, all right, the art direction's off the charts, all right, it actually runs, all right, unlike some other games, Red Dead 2, No Flame.
It's incredible.
It actually runs well. It looks fantastic. I still say to this game, when you combine that level of detail and that art direction, in my mind, I don't think a game needs to look any higher fidelity than what Witcher 3 looked. Perfectly realistic in its own artsy way, and it doesn't need to be increased. GTA 6, just saying. I want my FPS to be normal. And so when I go down the categories, though, graphics, all right, if I had to give Witcher a rating, it would probably be like a 9 out of 10. It's nearly perfect in my regard. Music, 10 out of 10. Has the most unique soundtrack in my mind when it comes to that sort of Nordic, if you want to call that cultural sort of music. It's so damn good. They're getting 9s. They're getting 10s. All right? Its worst category may get a 7. I don't know what that would be, but maybe the worst category 7. Can you do the same with your game? All right? I don't think you can.
I think I can. The categories you listed, except for story, I'll give you that. But the world it builds, it is a small one, but it is a truly fantastic one. Like, it has so much charm. Like, Craftworld is a fantastic place, and I think any kid would love to live in it. Would you love to live in the world of The Witcher?
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe not.
Didn't think so. Whereas Craftworld, wow. The music, fan-fucking-tastic. Can't say Little Big Planet 2 soundtrack was as good. Sleepyhead by Passion Pit, great track. That's the trailer song for anyone who may be trying to remember what that is. Little Big Planet 2 soundtrack, it's good. There's some bangers, but it's not as good as Little Big Planet 1. But the reason I can say that Little Big Planet 2 soundtrack is good is because it included all the Little Big Planet 1s in it, in the creative. So it counts.
Okay. It's like a music sandwich out there. I see.
It certainly is. Graphics, it looked great. It was a PS3 game, notoriously difficult to develop for, but when developers finally worked it out, it actually was a decent architecture and you could do a lot with it. And so I think Little Big Planet 1 actually looked great. Little Big Planet 2 looked even better. I have to agree with you on that point. Like, both of our games probably look as good as a video game needs to be. It doesn't need to look any better than that.
When it comes to evaluating the best game of all time, in my mind, one part that does need to be evaluated is the complexity of the task at hand, right? So when the developers set out to make this game, how complex was the scope? And in my mind, you cannot get more complex or harder to develop when it comes to a project than Witcher 3. It's an open world game where the story remains the main focus.
Yep.
When you think of other open world RPGs, maybe you can get away with it and say, look, the story didn't require as much labor when it comes to the writing or the narrative or the story beats. In Witcher 3, it's not the case. So it has all the complexity of an open world sandbox where players are going to do whatever they please. And the developers have to develop for that, right? They have to account for, is the player going to go to this corner of the map where we didn't have anything? Yes, they are. Well, crap, we got to put something there, And then you combine that with the complexity of a narrative-driven focus. I don't think you can possibly come to the conclusion that Witcher 3 isn't the best game of all time when you consider the complexity of the tasks that they excel at. They don't just make a good game with that level of scope, they make an exceptional game. And I think that is far harder to do than another game, which is also great, but the scope, let's be honest, Max, is a lot more narrow. In my mind, it's a lot easier to develop a game like Little Big Planet when the scope is dramatically smaller.
I would tend to agree with you, and I have to agree because there's no way that you could say that they're on the same level. But here's where that logic doesn't quite hold up, because The Witcher 3 was meant for a completely different audience, completely different. Little Big Planet is very much a kid-friendly game, but it has adults in mind too. You can be creative with it, and adults who have a more developed brain than children were really rewarded with that. Kids could screw around and make the 15th bomb survival, or adults could make incredible creations. I remember playing this one, Dead Space, on the first game, Little Big Dead Space, I think it was called. Incredible. It was a platform to do whatever the hell you wanted to. Your only limitation was the thermometer and your imagination. As cringe as that is, it's true. It's flawed to say that the scope really matters because, the scale of a scope really matters, because it is proven that it doesn't. They're both fantastic games in their own right, except Little Big Planet 2 is far more approachable. It honestly probably has a wider audience in The Witcher because it is so much more approachable. It's just unfortunate you can't play it nowadays, fucking Sony. Like, all the servers are gone, so, unlucky, I guess. I think it's flawed to say that The Witcher 3 is better simply because the scope was more grand and it pulled it off. I don't think that necessarily matters.
Let's say I were to make a game and you made a game, right? And my game required, like, I don't know, 50% more effort from me to produce, right? Or 50% more skill to produce than yours. And then when I put my game out, it is heralded by both of us as outstanding. It's so good. And then you make a game that is also amazing and really fun to play, but it required you 50% less skill and time to produce. You don't think there's any evaluation you can make from that at all?
Oh. No, that absolutely is. Absolutely. And I think Witcher 3 is a technical marvel, truly. Like, it is a brilliant thing. I have to put my hand up and say I've never played any more than the opening act. It's not my sort of game. I did not enjoy it all that much, but it has so much value. It is a truly spectacular product, and the story is heralded widely as one of the greatest. To answer your question, yeah, there's absolutely merit in that, but at the end of the day, I think it's really up to the eye of the beholder, right? And that's ultimately what we're trying to argue here. But I think what you're trying to say is effort equals better. More effort equals better, which isn't necessarily true, and you know that to be true. We could go on and on about various examples of why more effort doesn't always mean better, but I don't think we need to.
Maybe not that 1-to-1, but more effort plus success in result. I think does.
But surely you could find success in lesser effort too, like in Little Big Planet 2, as I think you have admitted.
Yeah, you can definitely find success, but when I'm grading something as the best, right? When I'm looking to evaluate a product as what is the best of this thing, if one is more complex than the other and excels, and the other also excels but is less complex, I have to give it to the one that is more complex because it took more to produce. It was harder. It was harder to achieve the outcome in question. Therefore, I'd have to give it the crown of the best. Would you agree?
No, I would not agree. Not necessarily. I can't agree with that logic because this might be flawed and you might be able to pick this apart fairly easily, but I want to take your mind to the world of literature for a minute. Okay?
Okay.
The Great Gatsby. How long do you reckon that book is? I actually don't know off the top of my head, but would you say it is shorter than the Harry Potter universe? Than the 7 Harry Potter books combined, right? Yes. Now, they're both heralded as brilliant pieces of work, right? If we're talking about the scale, if we're putting scale and the success of that scale, then compare The Great Gatsby to even you go into Jane Austen's, any of those works, The Great Gatsby still holds up as a brilliant piece of literature, right? It has its flaws. I mean, I wasn't a fan of it when I read it all those years ago, but it's still a great piece of literature that is world-renowned, of course. So is Harry Potter. So are all the works of Jane Austen. But you can't say that the Great Gatsby in its isolation is lesser than the works of Harry Potter or Jane Austen simply because it's smaller. That doesn't hold up.
Okay, you are kind of right in that. You are kind of correct in saying that these classic literary works were so instrumental and therefore they're obviously heralded as being outstanding pieces. But they're obviously less complex in terms of scope, which is my original argument. However, I'm gonna make an not an addendum, but I'm gonna kind of like bring you back into the center of this, because your example kind of frays off, and I'll explain why. I would argue that the complexity of The Great Gatsby is not because of the length of the book, right? It's not how many pages or how many words are in it. The complexity was the conditions surrounding when the book was written. That book has obviously been a shaper when it comes to literary works for the future.
Absolutely.
Many people read that book and took ideas or took inspiration or took a collective sort of sense of imagination from that book that they then used for their own, right? It was kind of a stepping stone, so to speak. And so what I would argue is it's less complex in terms of length, in terms of word count than the Harry Potter universe. But I would argue it was far, far more important because when it was written, there was far less reference material for that type of book to be made and written. Whereas with Harry Potter, obviously a fictional work that was done many years later, you could argue that J.K. Rowling had a lot more source material to gain ideas and inspiration from. Therefore, the complexity of actually producing the work was less.
I see where you're coming from. So let's pull this back into the video game world, because I get where you're coming from, 100%. What you're saying is The Witcher 3, and I have to agree with this, is very much a benchmark for RPGs, 100%. Right, like I think a lot of video game companies have since copied a lot from that. The same can also be said for Little Big Planet, and ultimately they're only released 8 years apart, I believe. I think Little Big Planet 1 was 2009, 2 was 2011. After that, I'm not sure the dates, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Roblox, probably the biggest game right now in terms of, I don't know what statistics, but it's pretty large in the kid community. You could argue that Roblox took a lot from Little Big Planet. That whole idea of being a platform for games, right? Fundamentally, it could be considered the same idea. It's just one is 3D, one is 2D. But you can make a 2D game in Roblox in the same way you could make a 3D game in Little Big Planet. So, like, if you're gonna say like the time and how much more can be inspired by the product, that's what makes it good. Then I just have to say to you that I don't think that quite holds up.
Okay, I'm gonna be honest, Max. I do think you've walked into an ant's nest on this one, and I'll explain why. I don't know if using Roblox as the thing that was inspired from what you're heralding as the best game of all time is actually a very good thing. Because I personally think Roblox is garbage.
I also think Roblox is total garbage.
If you think what you claim as the best game inspired total garbage, does that not concern you with your argument at all?
Not my argument, because the masses like Roblox. I don't, but that's okay because people still play it. It is still widely played nowadays. In the same way that I don't like The Witcher 3, but I could still say it's a brilliant game.
Okay, that's fair enough, but the masses may regard one thing, but your opinion is that the best game of all time is Little Big Planet. And so my question is, if your argument is, okay, well, in this case, from your original example, Little Big Planet is The Great Gatsby, and Roblox is, the Harry Potter books or whatever, work was derived
let's go with that.
From The Great Gatsby.
Yep.
Let's go with that. If you regard the offspring of that as garbage, then how can you possibly think that's an argument in favor of Little Big Planet being the best game of all time?
Simply by market size. And I think there are plenty of garbage books that have been inspired by The Great Gatsby, no? Loads of them. But that doesn't diminish its original significance.
That's right. But you'd also argue from the point of picking good inspiration points, right? So you'd say, okay, Great Gatsby inspired these works. No one, when they say that, then lists off a bunch of trash, right? They proceed to list off works that were inspired by The Great Gatsby that went on to such tremendous critical acclaim, right? For being important literary works. What you've done is you've listed one thing that was inspired from your game that also happens to be absolute garbage.
Okay. Well, I'm sure there's plenty of other creative games. Dreams by the same company, brilliant. They wouldn't have made that if it wasn't if they didn't believe it to be financially viable. A lot of the Scribblenauts, that's a brilliant game. Mario Maker, you could probably say was inspired by it. That's probably a better example. Things with a level builder, I think, really kind of date back to Little Big Planet. There were level builders before, of course, but I think that was the era of level builders around then. Like, lots of games put in level builders. Lots of games put in things like like video makers inside the game. Like there's just so many examples of these coming through that you just kind of, I don't know. I don't think it really matters what example you pick. In your argument, you're saying here games after it, products after the original. The number of products after the original affects its quality, right? And so if you really want to go on scope, yeah, okay, you could probably say games after The Witcher 3, like Dark Souls, brilliant series that probably took a significant inspiration from it. Yeah, again, I personally don't like Dark Souls. I am going to get shanked for that one, but not my game.
Oh. And what are your thoughts on Elden Ring? Actually, don't tell us.
I'm not going to.
The comments will eat you.
Everyone loves them. Not my cup of tea. Don't enjoy them personally. But to each their own, you're allowed to like them. I think they're great games, just not for me. If your original argument was the number of things that could be inspired from the original works, then surely, even though Roblox is a bad game, you could actually argue, yeah, that's also a valid point, no?
See, the thing was, that wasn't my argument, though. What I was using it as, it was an example to counter your original example of The Great Gatsby to Harry Potter, right? And so we're talking about complexity. And then when I brought up the offspring of that product, I immediately thought you would list something good, to be honest with you. But you listed Roblox, which is kind of your own damn fault. Now, that is true. What you're saying is true. But I would say the markers for the original game in Little Big Planet, like you kind of admitted to in your argument, there were many level builders before then. So I don't know if you can claim...
There are plenty of RPGs before Witcher 3, no?
There were. But how many can you name combined everything that's in The Witcher 3 to the extent?
Probably none. And the same way that I couldn't do the same for Little Big Planet.
People in the comments, correct that man, because he is lying.
Oh,
am I?
I'm lying. Oh, you're lying.
No, he's not lying. He just doesn't know better, people in the comments.
This is you, mate. You like Witcher 3 the most. Fuck off.
No, but my logic is this, right? When you think of things that inspired The Witcher 3, right? You go back to RPGs like the original Fallout, right? And Baldur's Gate, where it's isometric, right? The perspective is taken back and you're looking down on the character, right? And then after that, you had an evolution on that genre by going into first person. Things like Oblivion kind of shifted that. And same with Morrowind. The perspective was shifted, right? And so the player was more connected to who they were playing as, the NPCs they were meeting, etc., etc. And then they kind of one-up that when you had games like that kind of meshed the genre. Like, for example, Red Dead isn't an RPG, but it kind of meshed a bunch of different genres together, right? And so when you look at that and the offspring of that, if we had to patent it to Witcher 3, the offspring of Witcher 3 is then something like Kingdom Come Deliverance, which is so unique because it took a lot of the story elements from Witcher 3, amplified them as well, but then made it more hardcore. They kind of brought back that kind of hardcore approach to it, right? And so I think there's a clear pattern there. Mainly, now I'm kind of cheating there because I know for a fact that the Kingdom Come devs were directly inspired by a lot of the stories. I was going to say that,
but I'm glad you admitted it.
Hey, look, you have to have ball knowledge to be able to play soccer, man. That's what they say.
I was literally about to say exactly what you were going to say. So well done. Credit to you.
So, I mean, in that instance, I think the genre has a clear evolution where you can follow the paths, right? You can follow it. There's a clear generational trend going from, the isometric RPGs, Baldur's Gate. I think there's another game called Of Might and Magic or something by Troika RPG, Tim Kaine, etc. You follow that to RPGs that kind of then change the perspective, things like Oblivion, things like Morrowind, right? And then evolution from that, you can patent to Skyrim, to then Witcher 3, to then Kingdom Come. There's a nice, simple process to go from one to the next, and how they kept one-upping each other, right?
Yep.
With yours, I'm not so sure that lineage is correct, but maybe we'll just have to agree to disagree.
Well, here's some food for thought.
Okay.
Little Big Planet was mainly for kids. Yeah, we could definitely agree on that bit, 100%.
Yeah.
Now it was a very how do you say, like simplistic. It was a simplified level builder. How many of those people do you think were inspired by that system and then took that the skills that they built, the creativity that they were able to build up in their younger years, to being game developers, level designers in actual software like Unreal Engine, Unity or whatever? How many of those people do you reckon did it? Surely then yes, okay, it's not
probably a lot,
not a direct evolution, and I don't think there's quite an equivalence to what you were trying to say, to what I'm also trying to say. But I still think you can say, in terms of the effect each of those games had on people in terms of development, I still think there is a clear link between those.
Well, you might be right about that.
There's no
but I
evidence,
think
though.
the
It's
link.
very hard to prove that, I will admit. I will give you that.
Well, that's what my argument's going to be. Is if that's the case, if that's your argument, right? I think you can make the exact same argument about a game like Minecraft. How many people played Minecraft that are now game developers that probably use some of the inspiration from Minecraft, whether it's the building system, whether it's the freedom when it comes to exploration, that kept that in mind from their childhood to becoming a game dev to then putting products in the market that we all love and enjoy now when they come out on Steam, whatever it is. I don't know if that argument, unless you can have evidence to say, okay, they came from this, they did that, they said they're inspired by this, and that produced the product. I don't know if you can claim ownership, but look, I'll give it to you. I do agree that without a doubt, some people that were inspired from Little Big Planet when they were a kid went on to do great things as game devs. Without a doubt, that's definitely a thing. I just don't think the path that is as clear, which is where I guess we will agree to disagree. But the other thing I want to push you on here, okay, is earlier you said something that was so baffling, I almost jumped out of my chair, all right?
Oh, dear.
You said earlier that you can't play your best game of all time. How?
You cannot.
Then how? Because Sony's evil, I'll give you that, right? Sony, you buggers, you cheeky boys.
I would go so far as to say evil. I would like to one day be sponsored by them, but you know.
Yes, actually, I take that back, please, Sony. Give us free shit. But how can you possibly regard the best game of all time as a product you can no longer access?
Look, there are many ways. There's two rebuttals there. Number one, you can access anything nowadays, and also people. The Little Big Planet community is incredible. They actually somehow, very dubiously, managed to archive every single level that was published on Little Big Planet 3, which includes 2 and 1. So now you may. Now I do also want to dispel a question that I'm sure you are definitely burning to ask before I get back to that. Little Big Planet 3, was it any good? It was developed by a different team. It was buggy as shit, and the story wasn't that interesting, and it didn't add very much, which is why 3 is not the top game there, just in case you were wondering. So 2 and 1 were shut down 2021, 2022, somewhere in there, because of security vulnerabilities. And so it was obviously built on insecure protocols, like you could do anything on it, basically. People got stuff wiped. People got their consoles taken over, like that sort of crap, right? Terrible stuff. So they had to shut that down. And then 3 was eventually shut down because it was too hard to maintain. I really think Sony lost big time there, but you know, we move. It is what it is. But to answer your question, how can I regard that as the best game ever? Well, I feel like that's kind of a non-question. It was up to, you could still play it if you download through very legal means. I never would.
He said legal, Sony. Legal.
If you download illegally, you're a terrible human being. Or, you know, it was back in the day when you probably bought the game on disc. That's still playable. And if you own the game on a piece of hardware, like you download it through the PlayStation Store, that is still also playable. You can still load it up if you want to. So there's plenty of ways to play it. And it's just a shame it's not being marketed anymore. It's not in the grander scheme of people's mind. But also, I wonder, if you release a game like that nowadays, would it be as successful? I don't know. I don't think so.
That's a good question.
I don't think so.
I'm not sure.
I really don't think so. So to answer your question, no, you can't play it, but I don't believe it should at all affect its quality or how good it stands in someone's mind.
Okay, fair enough. Well, if you could still play it through the means that people originally
legal
purchased
means,
it, then
only
fair
legal
enough.
means.
Legal, only legal. Please, Sony, we want the sponsor deal. No, we don't. Fuck Sony. I'm joking, please.
They made supported Breaking Bad, so you know you got to give them that.
We got to give it to them then. All right, fair enough. I'll accept that. I will concede that point. That is a very fair argument. And honestly, whilst you were talking, I kind of conceded it in my own mind, because also, if I played the best game of all time, just because I couldn't play it again wouldn't make it not the best game of all time, right?
Yep.
So I'll give you that. I'll concede on that. But as a final point, before we conclude this, all right, this obvious, very serious debate where you're wrong and I'm right, Max, of course. That's how these things work, internet. Well, that's how the commenters are going to see this, because no doubt there is already a war waging down there of people saying The Witcher 3 is trash, or saying, how could you say Little Big Planet is the best game, blah, blah, blah. Yep. All right. And I agree with the latter half, because Max is wrong, of course.
Oh, yeah.
But when it comes to choosing the best of something, I think another factor is replayability. right?
Oh,
And
you've walked
if-
into an ant's nest here this time, mate. Oh,
Have
dear.
I?
Oh, dear.
Bring it on. I will
right.
argue Witcher 3 is one of the most replayable RPGs
Yep.
because the story and narrative are so good, and there are
Many
millions,
parts to
they're not literally millions, but so many choices that you can change on your second playthrough. I just think that adds a whole new level and dimension when you consider it's a story game that is still replayable. How many story games can I think of that are truly replayable, where your decisions truly change
Not many.
the entire outcome or the entire narrative of a side quest?
Not many at
Very,
all.
very few. In this game, it is most of them where that's
Incredible.
the case. And so I would put it to you, please argue the other side of this. I would love to hear a counter argument. I just don't think one exists, Max.
There is no counter because Little Big Planet is infinitely replayable. It's a level creator. Its entire purpose was to be built on community. Yes, okay, the story built into the game, no, that's probably not as replayable beyond getting all the collectibles and all the items that you can use in the create mode, but it is infinitely replayable in the sense that it was a massive game. It had over 1 million levels published to it in Little Big Planet 1 alone, and I think it then tripled by the time it got to the end of 2's life cycle. So to say that, to imply that Little Big Planet is not replayable, got you there, mate. Unfortunately, that's just simply not true.
I would never imply that. It's definitely replayable. However, when I look at replayability, I don't just look at being able to do a new thing each time. All right? I don't think that's the extent of replayability that I'm looking for.
It's an interesting angle.
Well, here we go, right? When you're talking about replayability, you're looking at the incentive to replay it. What's the incentive to replay Little Big Planet? Well, to play new levels, right? And to play user-created things. Is that a fair, I guess?
Yeah.
Okay, it's a fair supposition. So if that's the extent of the replayability, that's great. It's clearly a replayable game. But when you compare that to what's the extent of replayability in Witcher 3? Well, if I did one thing,
vast.
It's fairly vast, right? But I would say the replayability is different because it is canonical story, right? That, in my mind, when I compare the two, and once again, this kind of relates to my complexity argument in a way, when I think about implementing a replayable system in an RPG where the story is the focus, that to me is an achievement beyond simply the replayability of a gameplay mechanic. In my mind, that is a lot easier to reproduce. Something like Minecraft has obviously done it. Something like God forbid I say this, something like Roblox has clearly done it as well. That, to me, seems like far easier to implement in terms of replayability than something that, in theory, a player could 100% and then still come back to replay a totally new outcome in a story or a side quest. To me, that is a shining achievement that should be heralded as the best game of all time.
Interesting. Very interesting. I just have to say, yeah, you're right. But I think there's two different things of replayability there, two different definitions, and they are both right. That neither of them are wrong. When we're talking about replayability, I think Little Big Planet's replayability applies, but it's just a bit different. User-generated content could be considered playability rather than replayability, but I still think it's important to remember that kids and even adults spend hours on that game creating their own stuff, coming back to their creations again and again to iterate, to rebuild, to continue making, and then going on to other people's worlds and playing those, meeting friends and having this and playing the same levels again and again, but doing different things. It was a vast game. It wasn't just a single player user generated stuff. You could join your friends, and you got different experiences the more people you had. And so I get your point, and I don't disagree. But I also have to say they are, as you said, they're very different, and so they both apply, I think.
No, that's fair enough. And you know what? We're getting towards the end here, so I'll make one final appeal to people watching this of why I'm right and you're wrong, Max. Because once again, that's how we do these things. Listen, people watching this, if you haven't played The Witcher 3 and you like RPGs, unlike Max over here who hates Elden Ring and
I don't hate
it.
I don't hate it. Don't you fucking
He
dare.
hates it. Don't listen to him. He's lying. He hates it. No, I'm joking. No, look, if you've never played The Witcher 3 and you love an open world RPG with a clear story where there is outcomes you can choose and the outcomes are radically different, in my mind, The Witcher 3 excels like no other. There is potential in that game for you to experience that I can't even, and oh my god, I haven't even mentioned Gwent, right? The greatest side mini game in any game ever. I went to 100% and got every card in that game, even though it is entirely unrelated to the main systems or the main combat loop. It's awesome. Just a mini game, and I love it, and there were quests about it. It was fucking sick.
That is awesome.
Anyway, if you haven't played it, play it. It is indeed the best game of all time. Unlike Max, who has a wrong opinion, which you're going to hear from now. Max, what are your final thoughts?
Now, my final thoughts. Oh my goodness, I just jump scared by something on my monitor. My final thoughts, right? Little Big Planet was a platform for games, as they said in the trailer for number 2. And I think that while a marketing gimmick is absolutely true, and I think it inspired many, many kids to become more creative, to, just be someone who creates, who adds to the world rather than, modern day, which is a lot of kids are just taught to consume from early on. And so it was a different era, of course. And I don't want to lump Witcher 3 into saying that's just a consumer thing, because it isn't. Like, there's so much you can do. You can be creative in that in your own way. And there's a lot to explore and a lot to do. But it is a totally different thing that you can output, right? Little Big Planet let you be a kid in the best way possible without getting your fingers dirty, if that makes sense. But it also let adults be very, very technical, very creative, and hone their skills on this kids game where you probably won't get anything out of it. Yes, okay, you sometimes got things called MM picks, which is like the developers go on and pick a bunch of levels every so often and say, these are brilliant, you must play them. And if you're really good at it, you'll get a certain character cosmetic, right? A crown and other things. So, like, there's all this, right? There's all this stuff. But I think what's really important to remember is The Witcher 3, technical masterpiece, all that. But what Little Big Planet did for kids back in the day probably can't be matched by Witcher 3. Partly because Witcher 3 is an adult game, but also because it was this creative platform that allowed you to do so much. How many kids have gone on from there, starting Little Big Planet, to be legendary game designers? I'm willing to put money on there being at least one developer who contributed to Witcher 3 who was inspired by Little Big Planet. I'm willing to put my money on it, a significant amount of money, that there is at least one developer in there who is in game development because of that game.
And you know what, Max? I'll give that to you. I think that is probably a very high likelihood in terms of whether or not you want to give away your money to someone in the comments or not. No, that's
not really.
I think that's very. I think that's
it was a
very
rhetorical,
likely. And look, now that we're at the end of this, of course, it's all a bit of fun. Obviously, Max and we can each have our own best game, and there is no definitive the best game. It's all person to person. It's all our opinion, and we're just doing this for a bit of fun. But look, when I had to make my list, I kind of realized something, Max, and I said this at the beginning, where I had to pin it down. How can I choose my favorite game of all time when there's so many? I love so many different games, and it was honestly impossible to pick, but I just had to pick one from that list for the sake of this video. And when I went down that list, I realized that I loved that all the games on that list did something better than the others. For example, Age of Empires 2 is a far different game than Fallout New Vegas on that list of my favorite games of all time, because they do things radically different, and I each love them all the same. And so what I would argue is that when it comes to this conversation, we really shouldn't be picking the best game of all time. We should be picking like our top 5, because there are so many we all love, and that's what counts at the end of the day. But what say you? People in the comments are already battling it out because this is fun,
Exactly.
What say you? Who did you agree with more? Who do you think is an idiot? And what is your favorite game of all time? Please let us know. And thank you very much for listening.